choice to me implies consciousness. We both agree that this stuff happens early, so when I'm subjected to a certain set of difficult experiences, and we can all think of what they could be, whether it has to do with personally being maltreated, or finding yourself as an infant in a war zone, or whatever, like Diederik did, whatever it is, and I did, whatever it is, what choice do I have at the moment when I conclude that I'm suffering because I'm somehow deficient? There's no consciousness there. And to me, without consciousness, you can't talk about choice. So, when you say choose again, I get it. It means that today I can choose. I can actually choose. Am I worthless? Am I insufficient? What I decided unconsciously, way back then, before I had any words for it, I can choose again. I can see where that came from, and I don't have to be compelled by it anymore. But what is this choice that you keep insisting on happened in the first place? How can we choose when there's no awareness, there's no consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is you can't. However, this room is not full of 2-year-olds. This room is full of people well over 14. And so when I finally got to the point where I was totally fed up with my life, and I had a choice of either driving off the Sea to Sky highway, I found a spot where there was no barrier, and it would go down about 2,000 feet. There was no chance of a wheelchair at the bottom of it, or something had to change. And from that moment on, I became absolutely committed to no longer ignoring the thousands of thoughts that run through my mind, no longer taking anything for granted, no longer listening to a feeling and justifying the feeling. I do not want to justify an upset ever anymore. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, all of us have situations in our lives. Every single one of us have situations in our lives where we all would agree that is a reasonable response. You are upset, and that makes perfect sense. What I don't want anymore, I don't want anybody to tell me anymore that I have a reason to be upset. Because if you do that, you put me back in jail. So I will never do that for you. I don't expect you to do that for me. We have a very simple exercise. We do a lot of work in a circle. And so somebody will come with a story, and the story will be incredibly upsetting to that person. And that person has made an interpretation of the situation, and that the interpretation gives her the reason for the upset. And she's not budging from that. Then we go around the circle and we ask the other 12, 13, 14 people, is there another way of seeing this story? And then the original person can hear 12, 13, 14 different interpretations of the same situation. And what happens then is we make absolutely clear that all of those are also interpretations. But they were chosen by a different I. So the original I chose one interpretation which was devastating. The other interpretations came from a different I. And then what we make clear is that none of these are true. Not one of those interpretations is true. However, having done this little exercise, I now know that I can choose another interpretation. I have a really strong story about this, and Gabor knows this. It was a woman that came to see me about 14 years ago. And she had been sexually abused by her father, by her brothers, by her uncles, by simply every male in her early life had sexually abused her in horrific fashions. And she was suffering from a variety of cancers, and she was very, very, very upset. So she told me the story, and in the first session. The second session, she started telling me the story again, and I said, well, sooner or later, you and I have to understand that you telling me the story again is not going to get us out of it. So is there a way that we can cut through the story and go down to what's actually going on? And what we teach with sexual abuse or any other abuse is that yes, it did happen, but it happened to a body. And who am I cuts in right there at that point, because I am not the body. All my suffering, all the problems, every single problem on this planet comes from body identification. If you can think of one problem that does not come from body identification, let me know, but you can't. So I turned to this woman because we were not making any progress with the spiritual approach that we use. And I said, can you say, my father's innocent and I love him? She exploded. She was absolutely furious. She said, haven't you heard a word of what I said? The fucker should rot in jail. Do you know what he did? And I said, yeah, I know what he did. Can you say, my father is innocent and I love him? Same explosion. The third time I said, what would it cost you to say, my father is innocent and I love him? And without missing a beat, she said, it would cost me myself. And I said, brilliant. That is the self you're defending. What you're defending here is the self you made up in the abuse, but that's not who you are. Who you are was not abused because who you are cannot be abused. Does that make sense? Who you are is infinitely above the battleground of abuse. And the minute you allow that to be true, the minute I allow that to be true, I can turn around absolutely every memory and reinterpret it and live that wonderful statement. I don't know who came out with it, but it's never too late to have a happy childhood. It's simply a matter of going back over and over, choosing a different interpretation. The interpretation is what I'm living. So the interpretation of not being picked up at the airport is what my experience is. But the I that makes the interpretation is a false I. That I can be transformed, and that I has to be transformed if I want to have a different experience on the planet.
Okay, put that in your pipe and smoke it.